Texas Tech is taking Baylor's lunch money in the transfer portal, and then they're giving it to the guys that Baylor should try to add to their team. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by FanDuel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and The Cam Show on YouTube, bringing you your Friday transfer portal update. Just a quick run through of what's been the week that was for Baylor football in the transfer portal. And I got to be honest with you guys, it wasn't very great. Looking at one of the targets that is looking at Tech instead of Baylor and why that isn't working out for the Bears. Maybe taking a second look at another impact wide receiver who was making some waves in the transfer portal. And then their top defensive target, I would say, of the last few weeks has also decided to go elsewhere. Oof, couple of L's this week for the Bears. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. First, I want to start with Omari Evans. Obviously, he just entered the portal this week from Penn State. He was big-time playmaker for them on the outside for a team that didn't utilize its receivers a lot, specifically in the Orange Bowl, where they did not complete a pass to their receivers, their receiving core. I tend to think that a team that made the CFP semifinal isn't that bad at receiver, that they don't haul in a single catch from that group in said semifinal. I have to think some of that's on the quarterback a little bit, if we're being honest. But it is worth noting that Penn State did not have a 900-yard guy on in terms of the receiver room, but Omari Evans certainly shows that big playability. We did the segment on him just a few days ago, earlier this week, and it's someone that I'm like, no brainer. Baylor, go out and get him. A big prototypical XY receiver, big playmaking ability, 20 yards a catch this season. Did have a touchdown in the playoff, had a long ball touchdown against Boise State, and he's a Texas guy, a Central Texas guy, Killeen, Shoemaker High School, throwing touchdowns to Monterey Baldwin in high school. Like, to me, that's a no-brainer. And I look at where Baylor's at wide receiver. You've got to have some help here. And it's announced on Thursday that Omari Evans has scheduled now 4 visits, and that would be Tennessee, Washington, Syracuse, and Texas Tech. First thing that pops into mind when I see that is none of those schools are Baylor. Second thing is Tech, man. Tech. The money talks. And that's not an insult. If you've got the money, throw out the money, man. And obviously Syracuse does not. They don't really do NIL very much. Washington and Tennessee certainly have some. Obviously Tennessee more so have some money being pumped into those state-run programs. State schools, I should say. That makes it sound like it's in Soviet Russia or something. Vladimir Putin coaching Washington. No. I like Jed Fish. He's a Belichick guy. And right away, Omari Evans gets enough interest from those schools to schedule visits. And where's Baylor? Where's the We Play Players t-shirts? Because I certainly know one reason why a receiver of Omari Evans' ilk would want to catch passes from Baron Morton rather than Sawyer Robertson. Okay. And we know that Tech has a football budget that is, north of $10 million a year. That's just some of the ballpark figures. They make a ton of money from that program, and the university there is willing to pump a ton of money into the football program so that Joey McGuire can win the offseason every year. But this is a team that has obviously been killing the transfer portal. They have been awesome. They've been the best Big 12 team, and they've been in the top 3 or 4 teams in America in the transfer portal rankings this year. In fact, I think On3 still has them at number 1 in the transfer portal rankings of any school in the country. So they're clearly doing something right. And if that is money, so be it. Everyone else should be catching up. This is what we were so excited about with Baylor over the summer, the We Pay Players t-shirts. And certainly you would have seen in the past year, some of the players they've brought in, you would think both at the high school level and in the transfer portal, you would think that money was a part of that. And that's not an icky thing in college football anymore. That's the way it's got to be. Does it always work? Of course not. It doesn't always work in professional football. It doesn't always work in the professional world that you go and or coaches in college football. You pay them a bag and sometimes it doesn't work out. Go down to College Station and ask them, hey, does money solve all your problems in your football program? I think they would say it creates more than it solves. But the point is, Baylor certainly has a backing, obviously not at the level of Texas Tech, but when you've got a guy of that ilk out there at a position that you need, that you could have sort of an inside track on, I would say all the Texas schools would have an inside track on to bring him close to home, and yet you're not even going to get a visit out of that. That's disheartening. Look, at this point, with the success they've had in the portal over the last year and certainly the success they've had in high school recruiting, I trust the way that they have an eye for talent. But this just feels like one where they said, you know what? That's a kid coming from Penn State, coming from the college football playoff. And Killeen's a little bit closer to Austin than it is to Waco. I'm sure the big boys will be after him. And yes and no. Like Tennessee's a CFP team with a ton of resources that plays in the SEC, but you're telling me that you can't even compete with Tech? You can't even get on the table and Tech's got a visit? To me, that's a bad loss for Baylor. And time will tell, but this is a Tech program that's already brought in a bunch of playmakers already in this portal window. And at the end of it, they're bringing in the second leading receiver in a college football playoff semifinal team, and Baylor can't even get a visit. It feels like, again, kind of missing a seat at the table. And it's so easy to just say, well, of course Baylor's not going to go after him. He's coming from such a good program, and they don't have the money that Tech does. But I'm sorry. I see two teams that were 8-5. I see a Baylor team with a better offensive coordinator and a better starting quarterback and a head coach that's about damn near the same. If you look at what they've accomplished, Dave Aranda's accomplished more. So why can't, how big is the money discrepancy? That's the only question I would have after that. When you lay all that out, what is the money discrepancy? How much more is Tech able to pour into this after, again, we know that Tech has a lot of money in Big 12 standards, but after paying all these guys to come in here through this winter transfer portal, you gotta be at that table if you're Baylor. You just have to be. When that's such a position of need and you are so close to really accomplishing something pretty cool here in 2025, you at least feel like you have the personnel to do that. But you need another receiver, and there is a pretty elite one right out there. And Tech is going to get a call before you do. Doesn't feel good. Does not feel good. So now Baylor needs to pivot. And not only at wide receiver, but also on the defensive side of the ball. We'll tell you who they could look at, who they have lost this week, coming up next on the Locked On Baylor Friday Transfer Portal Update. But first, this message is brought to you by Prize Picks, the place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks has changed the game in daily fantasy sports. Whether it's the playoffs or regular season, Prize Picks has made it even easier than ever to win big while enjoying all the football action. Now it is playoff time, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks. Here's how it works. You simply pick more or less on at least two players, and if your picks hit, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Yes, that's right. 1,000 times your money just by making a few simple picks. Got the big divisional round this weekend. I already said it earlier, kind of spoiled it, but I'm looking at that Lamar Jackson under 250 passing yards when you've got Derrick Henry in the backfield, I think you can win some money off that anyway. And you get paid out pretty quickly, sometimes as quickly as 15 minutes. Ready to run your game this football playoff season? Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 just for playing. Don't wait. Take your game to the next level with Prize Picks. Prize Picks, run your game. It's still I would say, successful portal window for Baylor, and it's obviously not over yet. And Tech is kicking their butt right now in terms of just the amount of players they've brought in and the talent that they've brought in. But as I've said on this show before, Baylor and Texas Tech were not at the same starting point coming into this portal season, and certainly not after the first couple of days. Tech lost, I think it was 14, 15 guys to the portal, and a lot of those were in their rotation, and that doesn't account for the seniors that they lost as well. Baylor lost what, like 2 rotational guys, 2 starters kind of guys through the portal, and obviously lost some seniors as well, specifically at wide receiver. But just because Tech has the best portal class in the Big 12 this window does not mean that they are like instantly going to be a 10-win team. In fact, I'm going to make an argument on a show next week about how their portal classes are very similar in terms of impact, and that obviously reflects well on Baylor. But now the Bears need to pivot. Dave Aranda needs to look at who is left at wide receiver, because Omari Evans, that was one that a visit should have fallen into your lap. A commitment, that's a lot to say it's going to fall into your lap. But a visit, sure. This late in the window, things are a little bit bare. And you're getting these playoff guys now getting into the portal, and here's a hometown hero, so to speak, and you miss out on him, it looks like. Now, you could look for another Texas native who has played his college football in Texas, whose team made the playoff, but had entered the portal well before and now is in the portal again. Jonte Cook. Interesting story here. He committed to Washington and was on campus in Seattle. Beautiful campus, by the way. On campus for roughly 48 hours, according to reports, before he and Washington mutually agreed to part ways, which is also the same thing that we heard from the University of Texas earlier this year, that it was a mutual parting of ways. Now, we don't know what came about with this abrupt ending at Washington, but we do know that there's been some loose accusations of Jonte Cook's off the field behavior in the past, or his behavior in the locker room and butting heads with some people, coaches and players. That's what we heard out of UT. We don't know what's coming out from this, but certainly it becomes a red flag of sorts when you leave a team in the middle of the season, like he did at Texas, and then you're out of the place you transferred to 48 hours after getting onto campus. But what is kind of apparent in his football career is that he's very talented. We've not seen that come to fruition yet, but he still has a couple years of eligibility left. He's only 20 years old. He was a stud at DeSoto, obviously just outside the Metroplex. He was a 5-star guy out of high school with some Baylor interest there, by the way. And now he's available again. And you're looking for that kind of receiver, that big-time playmaking receiver. Didn't really find his footing at UT, had a couple touchdowns, but didn't really get regular playing time. Then there's certainly spots open here. And we've seen Baylor take risks, so to speak, in the last year or two, really the last year, in terms of character guys. Michael Trigg was a guy who left his team midseason in September of 23. He left Ole Miss, and he became a pretty big piece for you in 24, and hopefully will still be a pretty big piece in 25. There is also a connection here. Baylor needs a Y receiver to go alongside their ex guy and Josh Cameron, who was a huge part of the offense this past year and will definitely be a huge part of the offense in 2025. Well, there's a connection there too. We need a Robin to Josh Cameron's Batman. How about Josh Cameron's cousin, Jonte Cook? So there's a connection there. And there's an ability to say, hey, man, let's team up. We could really work together here. We love the staff. This is a way for you to kind of bounce back. There's certainly undeniable talent here from Jonte Cook, but there was also other Big 12 interest in him when he hit the portal. Arizona State, Colorado, chief among them. And there were rumblings around those programs that they said probably not worth the risk. And now he's in the portal again. Let's see if Baylor circles the wagons here. Let's see if they bring him in for a visit. And at least talent-wise, he's certainly someone who could fill some of their needs. Outside of wide receiver, another big need they have is obviously defensive end and pass rusher. And one of their main targets was Ben Bell from Texas State. Well, Thursday night, he committed to Virginia Tech. So that's another one you lost out on. Again, it's one of those, this isn't the only thing, but Baylor shouldn't be losing too many races to Virginia Tech in 2025. Like that's just not how it should be. Baylor's in a better spot than Virginia Tech, and they were a better team this past year. And Ben Bell is someone I really liked out of the portal, man. One of those classic step-up guys from Group of Five to Power Four at a position of need in defensive end. He was a little banged up this year, so the numbers don't fly off the handle. Only 3.5 sacks. He did that in 4 games, by the way. Including a couple of tackles and a sack against Arizona State, a game that Texas State only lost by 3 points, and Arizona State won our conference and went to the playoff. Had a big year a year ago before kind of the injury. Also, he's played 5 years, by the way. Had 10 sacks in 2023 and a forced fumble, 19 sacks over really 3.5 years of playing, 3.25 years of playing. Spread out across Louisiana Tech and Texas State. Speaking of a Josh Cameron connection, he's also a Cedar Park guy in that Austin area. So it's another one where it was close to home. You get the step up, obviously not as close as San Marcos, but you get the step up in competition. And it seemed like Baylor was really interested in this kid at the beginning. And that's a tough one to take, that you lose out on him on a commitment to Virginia Tech. And you lose out on Omari Evans potentially because you're not on the visit list at your 2 biggest positions of need in the same week. Maybe he doesn't like Carson Hall. Maybe he doesn't. Not as much as I do. I really like Carson Hall and his resume. And that's something to monitor as well. Carson Hall coming from Western Kentucky. Is there going to be anybody that he brings with him? And interestingly enough, obviously Baylor brought a couple of Hilltoppers in last year in Kendrick Simpkins and Jaquez Evans. Jaquez Evans plays defensive end. He played under Carson Hall for that last year in 23 at defensive end. Where he did get hurt was the preseason Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year. He has entered the portal, but he is not committed anywhere. If this kid's healthy and he can play for you, Carson Hall might be the guy that brings him back. But obviously there is a question of the health there. But all in all, not the best week at the office for Baylor in the transfer portal. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Is it just Tech having too much oil money and just crushing us with their weight? Then how do you explain the other one like Ben Bell? How do you lose out on a recruit like that? Or is this just something where you say, hey, Cam, let's wait for the spring transfer portal? That could be playing with fire. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Once again, 75% of you that are watching are not subscribed to the channel. It helps out the channel a lot, brings you more great Baylor content. We'll be back on Sunday after the TCU game. All I got to say about that, TCU stinks. You better not lose this game. Then we'll really hit the panic button. They just lost to Utah. TCU did. They lost to Utah. And half their conference wins are against Kansas State. So anyway, we'll catch you after that game. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. Hope you have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.